When you think about it, it's actually pretty hard to say when something's alive. Scientists tend to say that if it's made up of cells, then it's alive. Cells are the basic building blocks of all organisms. Organisms can either be unicellular, uni for one, or multicellular, multi obviously for many. We're looking at two main eukaryotic cells today. Let's start with animal cells. These have 5 parts. The outermost layer, which lets in substances in and out, that's called the cell membrane. The jelly-like substance where most of the chemical reactions happen, that's the cytoplasm. The nut-like structure that stores and protects the DNA, which is the code of life, that's the nucleus. Cell structures that release energy from the respiration of glucose and oxygen, mitochondria. And lastly, these very small structures that build the proteins the cell needs, that's the ribosome. When you look at any animal cell, you'll likely find these structures regardless of what species you're looking at. In the next video, we'll look at specialized cells. And now for the plants. They have the same 5 structures as animal cells with an additional 3. In this instance, the outermost layer, just like with prokaryotic cells that we saw in the last video, that's the cell wall. And the same thing, it strengthens and supports the cell. They still have a cell membrane as well, don't get it twisted. They're just hiding below the cell wall, don't make that mistake. The middle part that contains cell sap, that's called the permanent vacuole. And this also helps to keep the cell turgid, which just means firm. And the last unique structure are these chloroplasts. They have a green pigment inside them called chlorophyll, and this is where photosynthesis occurs. This is a good opportunity to look at prefixes. A prefix tells you how big or small we've made a particular unit of measurement. The unit we'll be looking at is the meter because we're measuring length now. But this rule applies to all the other units that you encounter. A meter ruler is obviously 1 meter long, and we can write that like this: 10 to the power of 1 meter. This is roughly the length of a standard guitar. A milli means 1,000th. That means you need to have 1,000 millimeters to make 1 meter. A millimeter is roughly the width of your Oyster card, which is also roughly the size of a frog egg. Have a look at how we write this. 1 millimeter equals 1/1000 meter. Put that in your calculator and that gives you 0.001 meter. If you remember the last lesson we did on standard form, 0.001 meter could also be written as 1 times 10 to the power of -3 meters. If that just baffled you, make sure you check the last video in the description, okay? Now these examiners love confusing you. Have a look at this example and tell me which one's bigger. Would that be 1 times 10 to the -3 meter or 1 millimeter? It's a trap. They're exactly the same, my G. 1 millimeter, when we write it as 1 mm, the last M tells you that the unit we're using is meter. The first M tells you the prefix, and that's milli, which is 1,000th, aka 10 to the -3. So literally, 1 millimeter means 1 times 10 to the -3 meters. The next prefix is a micro, which uses the strange letter mu, which is the lowercase m in the Greek alphabet. A micrometer is 1,000th of a millimeter. That means you need 1,000 micrometers to make 1 millimeter. A micrometer is roughly the size of a mitochondria. So how do you think we're going to write this then? Would it be 10 to the power of 5 meters, 10 to the power of -6 meters, or 10 to the power of -7 meters? If you said this one, then you're absolutely right. We're just adding our zeros onto the Pinckney number, the exponent. So have a look at this. 1 millimeter equals 1/1000 meters, and we write that as 10 to the power of minus 3 meters. 1 micrometer is 1 over 1000 millimeters. So adding 3 more zeros to our exponent, that gives us 10 to the power of minus 6 meters. So how many more times smaller is a micrometer to a meter? That minus 6 tells us something special. That means a micrometer to a meter is 1,000,000 times smaller. The next level down is the nanometer, which you probably will clock is 1,000th of a micrometer. That means you need 1,000 nanometers to make 1 micrometer. A nanometer is roughly the size of a small amino acid. So how should we write this then? Should it be 10 to the minus 9 meters, 10 to the minus 10 meters, or 10 to the power of minus 11 meters? Well, obviously it will be 10 to the power of minus 9 meters, following the structure that we've been looking at. 1 nanometer equals 1 over 1000 micrometers, which equals 1 over 1,000,000 millimeters, which equals 1 over 1 billion meters. So nanometer is the equivalent of 1 billionth of a meter. Now you're probably wondering, where does centi fit into all of this? Well, if you have 100 cents, you make €1. Or if you have 100 cents, you can make $1, depending on where you are. So 100 centimeters makes 1 meter. Therefore, to write this, would it be 10 to the power of minus 2 meters or 10 to the power of 2 meters? Of course, it would be 10 to the power of minus 2 meters. Alright, wrapping up this video, we looked at animals and plant cells and the different prefixes that you're likely to encounter. If you're still baffed, rewatch this video. Check out the description if you're ready to move on for some worksheets, and also for the answers to the last worksheets on the video on prokaryotics and standard form. And don't forget to like if you like. Peace.